Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Manestream podcast. My name is Eva Saladino, and I'm going to be your host today and discussing what I think deserves the title for Book of the Month. A little introduction. I am a junior English major with a concentration in creative writing. So I do a whole lot of reading on top of a whole lot of schoolwork. And I hope that all the literature covered here on the podcast piques your interest and you give the books a read yourself. Kicking off 2024, the book that I will be discussing is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. Jennette is a New York Times bestselling author and is probably mostly known for her role as Sam Puckett on the Nickelodeon show iCarly, which we all grew up watching and loving. It was hilarious. Her background is very tragic and unglamorous, but she writes about it with a lot of humor and validity, and I love that. So it spans from her youth to her early adulthood. So there's a whole lot of material covered. So I'm going to be diving pretty deep into the contents of the book. So if you're worried about spoilers, then I would go ahead and give it a skip. And I'm also going to be discussing some kind of sensitive topics. So if you care to not get into that, then also feel free to skip. So the way that this got my attention was, one, the title. It got a lot of mixed reactions online, which I thought was just really bold, what she decided to title this book. And because I grew up watching her shows, I felt like anything that I read online about her, I would rather hear from her in her book instead of rumors online and all that stuff. I felt like that wasn't good. So, yeah, the title just really grabbed my attention. I love the cover. It's really bold, and it's so cool. I'm gonna break down this review in kind of three parts, three of the main topics that she kind of discusses and just how they made me feel and what I think about them. First, I wanted to note that she separates this book into chapters, obviously, but there's also two parts to it. So she titles them Before and After, and that's in regards to her mom's death. And I thought that was such a gripping way to just part it. I loved that. I thought that the Before gets into a lot of her childhood and her upbringing and a lot of stuff with her mom, and then by the time you get to the After, you've kind of grown with her and seen all these things that she struggled with, and now you're like, well, what's gonna happen after? You gotta know. So jumping straight into the craziness, her mother, whose name is Deborah McCurdy, she was diagnosed with cancer in 1995, went into remission for 15 years, got it back in 2010, and then she eventually died in 2013 when it spread to her brain. Jennette was 21, so she was super duper young, but also, her youth was not really the same as others, so you could say that she was also very grown up by the time that she was 21. She had 3 older brothers. Jennette was the youngest and also the only girl, which I think contributes to a lot of the weird relationship, which I'll get into, that she had with her mother, just with her being the youngest and the only girl. I think that kind of contributed a lot to what she had to go through. Her mom was really not much of a mother at all. She was more like a manager, a bully, really, to Jennette for all of her life. So back to her being the youngest and them having a weird relationship. Deborah kind of lived or was trying to live vicariously through Jennette. Deborah had put Jennette into acting. at a very young age, because Deborah was really confident in Jennette's talent, which she was talented. And she was also really confident in the way that Jennette looked. So she just was like, you look too good and sound too good to not be, in the limelight and, providing our family at some point. So she put Jennette into acting, which Jennette did not want to do. Jennette actually says in the book that she wanted to be a writer. So that's sweet. She ended up being one. And so yeah, she basically just like, that was it. She put her in acting, and that's, the controlling really began. She was controlling, her mom was controlling in a way that was really hard to read, because like I said, like, she was so not like a mother. She would do so many things that were so unlike what a mother would do to her child, but especially her daughter. That just broke my heart. So she would make her audition for tons of things, like really, really, really bring her to all these different auditions. And she was so young. I don't remember exactly when it started, but she was very, very young. Because Deborah was so obsessed with the image of Jennette, especially when she was getting on camera and at these auditions, she wanted her to do well. She would teach Jennette to restrict her calories at the age of like 11, which is terrifying and should not happen. She would also give Jennette showers to kind of monitor what her body was looking like at that time, so that she could manipulate Jennette in a way to kind of fix herself before she was going into all of these auditions. And it was just, her youth was really stolen. It didn't really exist, I feel. And she talks about it in such a just, I don't even know the word. Maybe once everybody reads this, you can come up with your own word that describes the way that she writes, but it's just, it's insane. I'll just say that. So, there was a lot of mental manipulation that happened throughout all of this. Jennette was kind of raised to believe that her and her mom had this really special bond and really special relationship, because she was her little girl and she was her only daughter, and she had a lot of hope for Jennette. And so with a mixture of that and the mixture of her mom being sick, I think that Jennette developed this "my mom can do no wrong" kind of mindset, which ends up carrying out through basically until she dies. And even a little bit after that. I just think it was really hard to get away from the idea that her mom was doing these awful things to her, because it's her mom. Like, I don't think that she thought that a mother could do this. So I think there was a lot of confusion and mental manipulation that Deborah put Jennette through for the majority of her life. So there was a part in the book that was really insane. I think Jennette had mentioned it on a talk show that she was on recently, or once the book was released, where once Jennette was a little bit older, she had won this trip, this vacation to some tropical area. I don't exactly remember where. Basically had won this vacation, and it was for her and one other person. So she brought this boyfriend that she had at the time, and while they were out, Jennette struggled a lot with her body image, just because it was ingrained in her brain from a very young age to be very aware of what her body looked like. And so she's out on the beach with her boyfriend, and TMZ catches them, and the paparazzi just invades. They start taking pictures of them, and then, that's how paparazzi works. It's immediately on the internet everywhere. So this whole time, Jennette was telling her mom that she was on a trip with her gay best friend and that there was nothing to worry about and all this stuff. Kind of just lying, which I don't blame her. But so TMZ caught them, and the pictures were posted up everywhere. Her mother ended up seeing the pictures, and Jennette woke up the next morning with like 49 voicemails, 1,000 text messages, countless emails. Her mom had just blown up her phone because this was not something her mom approved of, and that became very noticeable because she had messaged Jennette saying, basically slut shaming her and just like saying awful things, saying that she looked like she put on weight, her boyfriend looked like an ogre, and like all of this just disgusting stuff. And then at the very end, like she had told Jennette like to send money because their fridge was broken back at home. Like she just had this such like unbelievable way of talking to Jennette that was like simultaneously putting Jennette down, but then putting her mother on this pedestal. Like, I'm better than you, even though we need money for the fridge. And, you know, it was really upsetting to read like all the things, and it kind of showed like the text message somewhere in here. I don't have the page marked, but yeah, so I wanted to talk about how if I were to write a report on this book and include like symbols and themes and stuff, I would definitely have her mother symbol, like female insecurity and manipulation. I just think like those are two things that she was so good at providing, not just to herself. I don't know a lot about how Deborah was raised, but clearly, you know, this had been something that has developed for over time, and then she ended up passing it on generationally to her daughter and ended up really screwing up her life. So terrifying. The next little segment that I wanted to get, next little part, that I want to get into is her time at Nickelodeon. So that's another big part of this book, is talking about her experience with child acting, which most child actors, I feel like, have a hard time, because it's a hard gig. No matter who your parents are, whether they're the best parents in the world, I think child acting is really, it can get tough. You know, you're a kid. You're not expected to do all these things that adult actors are doing, but yet you kind of are, depending on, you know, whose hands you're in. So I want to talk about the creator. This is kind of about her transparency that she provides during her time at Nickelodeon, specifically with Dan Schneider, who she addresses as the creator. She never actually says his name, but you know who created Nickelodeon. It was Dan Schneider. Speaking of him, I think most people know now that he's kind of been proven to be extremely verbally abusive on set, and also deciding to film like really sexually suggestive scenes with these like underage kids, underage people. He was just all around gross. Not the director, producer, creator that you would want for your first like big time gig, you know, because obviously like iCarly was her biggest role. I think she was in Malcolm in the Middle at some point, like littler things whenever she was younger, but like this was really like she was an early teen. This was her biggest role, and then this was the guy that was in control of all of that. So I think that was not good. So Jennette describes him in the book as mean-spirited, controlling, and terrifying, which I think describes him perfectly. I feel really bad because Jennette seemed so small, not physically, but just she seemed like such a small being. Like she didn't have any say in her own life. She had this overly controlling mother who put her into this overly controlling role with this overly controlling director. Like it was just this awful cocktail full of Jennette's gonna be abused in some way or another, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally. Just like all around, she was put in a really, really bad position. Yet she talks about it like it was just, you know, something that happened, and she's hilarious, and I love that about her. Oh yeah, there was a part like actually made me almost put the book down, not because of what she wrote, but because of like the context. And we'll get into this later, like how she kind of goes down this route with alcoholism and all this stuff. But there was a part where Dan Schneider had pressured Jennette into drinking alcohol. It was like maybe vodka and coffee or something, some kind of alcohol. Doesn't really matter. It was alcohol. but had pressured her into drinking it or trying it because he had claimed that the cast of iCarly was too pure, and that like the cast of Victorious and like all these other Nickelodeon shows were like more wild, I guess, and were like drinking and smoking and stuff like in between takes. She was literally 14, like she was literally a child, like, and he was forcing her to try alcohol, and like he's gross. So I think like that, I think kind of put her into this weird like thing where he was telling her like, oh, you're too pure, you need to do these awful things. Once she got to the, you know, the point where she was able to get alcohol herself, I think that kind of played a bad part. I don't think that was a good introduction to drinking alcohol for her. I think it gave her a twisted version of how it should be. So yeah, I think this part, her talking about Nickelodeon and Dan Schneider, solidified how powerless she was throughout really the entirety of her acting career, because she was also in Sam and Cat, as y'all know, is kind of a spin-off show that mixed Sam Puckett and Cat from Victorious. They like lived together. I don't know. It was kind of weird. I didn't love that show. She was older when she was in there, maybe like 18, 19, I think. And Dan Schneider was also the director of that. She was like at the time, like, I don't think Dan Schneider's involved at all anymore in Nickelodeon, but like she was in the peak time where he was in control of everything that was happening at the Nickelodeon headquarters, and therefore everything that he said everything that he said went, sorry, not goed. And yeah, so I also want to talk about something on a lighter note, since we're talking about all of this awful sad stuff. Her friendship with Miranda Cosgrove was actually surprisingly sweet, and because like, I don't know, I think I have this like image of like people on set just really not liking each other because they're having to work with each other. It's not like all sunshine and rainbows all the time. But she talked a lot about how Miranda helped her through her life, and like they had gotten a really, really strong friendship. Jennette grew up religious, super duper religious, and Miranda was not as religious, and so whenever they had become friends, Jennette's mom was really like apprehensive about it. She had told Jennette, you know, like, oh well, you know, Miranda doesn't pray, you know, so be careful who you're becoming friends with and all this stuff, giving her this like awful like opinion of other people. You know, you should just be friends with people if you want to be friends with them. It doesn't matter. So, but that didn't matter. Jennette ended up getting a phone, and they would like text every night for hours, and they would like stay up on the phone, and they would hang out after the set. And so that was a really nice thing to hear, because like I said, I grew up watching the show, and I'd heard all this awful things about it in her life, and so it was sweet to me that despite all of that, you know, she had her co-star was someone good in her life that ended up providing her help with, you know, the eating disorders that she ended up having, and it was just really sweet. So that I wanted to add that lighter note in, since we're talking about a lot of sad stuff. Additionally, I wanted to talk about her eating disorders and the alcoholism that she ended up kind of going through. Talking specifically about her writing for this part, I want to say that she presents it raw. You know, she doesn't really sugarcoat anything. That's not really something you can sugarcoat, but like specifically reading it, like with my eyeballs, it was terrifying. Like there were parts where I felt like I was getting nauseous just because of like, she explains it. Like I said, it's not glamorous. Like I don't think it's as glamorous to be a child actor as people might think, or an actor in general. I think it comes with a lot of hardships, and so she just paints that in the perfect way. Like you really understand what she went through. You understand how gruesome it was and how trying it was on her body and her mind, because of her mother's calorie restrictions that she taught Jennette how to practice. She developed anorexia basically immediately, and so all throughout filming these shows that she was in, that was always in the back of her mind. And as we know, like Sam Puckett's character, like 1/3 of her entire character is being obsessed with food. She always had like a chicken leg in her hand, or like the butter sock, or a fat cake. Like that was like literally her character. And so I think at some point she had asked the writers to like dial back on these jokes, because obviously they were mentally trying on her, which they didn't, obviously, because of course. So, which she actually found that it was hilarious, like, because she looks back now at all these things that she went through, and she finds it really ironic that like the character that she was playing was this like obsessed with food when she goes home, and she's, it was crazy. So, back to her mom, Deborah had wanted Jennette to look as young as possible and as small as possible. So, naturally, people go through puberty at a certain time of their life, and that happened to Jennette. So, she was going through puberty, her body was changing, and because her mom had kind of put this focus on, no, like, you need to look young, you need to look small, you need to look perfect, Jennette kind of wanted to like reverse the effects of puberty. She was disgusted at the fact that she was, developing boobs. She was disgusted at the fact that she was getting hips. Like, it was just really, really, like, she was like, this isn't supposed to happen. Like, this is awful. Getting her period. Like, it was all just like, it was too much change for her to handle, at, I think, the mental state that she was at. So I think that's kind of what contributed to her anorexia, is that she didn't want to go through all these changes, and she wanted to just remain small, for as long as she could. So she had a lot of struggle with that. And that ended up developing into bulimia. I don't remember exactly where she had heard about bulimic practices, but she had heard about it from somewhere, or I forget exactly like how it went down, but basically, like, she had tried to and it didn't work, and then she kept trying, and eventually that was just it. Like, she was hooked. She would binge and purge every night. She was living on her own at the time. She had this really nice apartment somewhere. I say really nice. It was always in the state of like disrepair. She always had maintenance men over, and she describes that really well, like how every time she came home there was like clanging and like all these construction noises, which would make me feel insane, nonetheless, with all the other stuff that she was dealing with. So yeah, she was living on her own at this time, so she had full control of just being on her own, coming home, eating a bunch, throwing up a bunch, just so sad. And she describes it like so vividly that you just feel so bad for her. I just want to like hold her. So that also tied in a little bit with the alcoholism that she ended up developing as well. She began drinking and becoming a little bit more, wild. Like, she would go out with friends and they would get a bunch of drinks. And I think she was just at this point, like, she was on her own. She wasn't as tied to her mom. And so I think that she kind of just broke out. She was like, I'm just going to go crazy, go stupid. So she's drinking a lot. She talks about that a lot. Like, she would come home after filming Sam and Cat and drink and then go to sleep and then wake up. And it was just this like awful cycle that someone at such a young age should not have to be going through. But yet there she was going through it. She went through therapy, but she still struggled throughout that. She talks about her therapist, who she had actually brought to some kind of like Nickelodeon awards, like a Nickelodeon award show. She had brought her therapist along because she knew that there was going to be a huge like spread, a buffet of food. And so she kind of wanted her there as support, and, it ended up crashing and burning. It is just like so many little details that she adds where you just feel so bad. She's now happily recovered, which is amazing. I could imagine going through everything that she went through and then remained just calm to a certain degree, and also the successful, She has a podcast now. I follow her on Instagram. She does little book club stuff. She clearly was born to be a writer and not an actress. And so I'm glad that she was able to break out of that shell and move into the shell that she wanted to be in. Points about her writing specifically, since I've been talking about the contents of the book, the whole entire book felt straight from her heart. It felt like I was reading into her mind. It didn't feel like there was an editor had gotten a hold of this and it just scrapped all the tone and voice that was behind it. She has nicknames for people and all this wit and cleverness behind her writing that is just so, it makes it unable to put down. I read this pretty fast. It's not a super duper long book, but it's it's got about 91 chapters, 304 pages before the acknowledgments. It's just you don't want to put it down. She's so funny. The content is so intense. For something so intense, it's so light. I love it. She had so much feeling without it feeling like a sob story. Never in this book did I feel like she was writing this in hopes of I'm gonna have all these people feel bad about me. No, she knew what she was doing. She wanted to put it down on paper. She wanted to set the record straight of everything that she had gone through, and I think that's so unbelievable that she was able to do that. Very genuine. So I really hope that whoever's listening decides to give this a read. I got my copy from Barnes & Noble. It was $27.99. So worth it. Please. Or if you want to do an audiobook, I know that it's on Spotify. Listen to it on your way to school. It might make you a little sad, but it's worth it. I wanted to say some of my favorite quotes as well. So I have two here. One being, she says, "I always forget that trying to reason with the unreasonable is unreasonable." And then the second one is, "Mom didn't get better, but I will." And she did, and her mom did not. I hope that you read this book. I hope that you watch the talk shows with this amazing woman. I hope you read the other books that she ends up writing. I know I'm going to. I think this is a really important read for young women. And I think it's a really important book for people in my generation, in Gen Z, because like I said, we grew up watching these TV shows, and so seeing what kind of went down behind the scenes is terrifying, but also brings a lot of light. At some point we start hearing about things that are a little bit heavier than we heard about whenever we were a kid, and I think that's all important to shed light on. And so I'm really glad that she did that. I'm really glad that she shed light on the truth. I'm just really happy that this book exists now, because I think it sets the record straight. So yeah, that's my official review. I would give this book a 10 out of 10, and thank you for listening. Goodbye.